Hey guys, it's me, Uncle Kevin. Today we're reacting to Africa is Not Poor because of colonization. Let's get into it.
You list here in one of your articles where you make you list here in one of your articles where you make reference to these rating systems, the bottom 10 countries for doing business in the world: Chad, Haiti, Central African Republic, Congo Democratic Republic, South Sudan, Libya, Yemen, Venezuela. There's a lovely example: Eritrea and Somalia. And so there are three exceptions in the African ecosystem: Mauritius, Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, Botswana, and Zambia. You pointed out in your prospectus, is it prospectus article?
Yeah, prospectus article of Artbridge Institute.
Right, that Mauritius is a rising star, and Rwanda is in some ways comparable to Georgia. So some of these countries have started to get this right.
Yes.
And so what's the consequence of that? And what does right mean?
What they have understood, what these countries have understood, is that economic freedom is at the center for prosperity building.
Economic freedom.
Rwanda, for example, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, is explicit about it. He said he wants to be the Lee Kuan Yew he wants to be the Singapore of Africa, and Lee Kuan Yew is his model. Now, the dirty mouths are going to start shouting, "Oh yeah, see, authoritarian, blah blah blah." Whatever. Me, I want to talk only about the on the economic
See,
side.
that's the thing. Like, I do get it, but we cannot say a wrong makes it right. Like, if a wrong is a wrong, if people are gonna call you out on the wrong, then that's it. But I feel like we've been super oppressed and in a weird space where we're like, yo, man, listen, we'll take the detectors as long as we have economic freedom. Because right now, all we're looking for is food on the table. We don't really care about who's in power.
Take Lee Kuan Yew and Singapore as your example, then it means that, like him, you're going to have to be serious about economic freedom. And that's exactly what he did. That's what Singapore did. When Singapore figured that out, they went on to put in the right reforms to make their environment some of the most business-friendly environments in the world, one of the most free markets environment in the world, and you saw the magic of Singapore. Today, Singapore is richer than its ex-colonizer, Great Britain. So when I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization, I'm like, please, let's move on from that. Does it have maybe a tiny percentage in where we are today? Maybe, and I don't know. But I know it's not the cause. Because if it were, many countless countries have been colonized before. And by the way, colonizing one another is humanity's history. It just happened that maybe Africa has been one of the last, colonized region in the world. So in our psyche, it is there, and it acts like nothing happened before to others. But flash news, it's the history of the world. We've been capturing each other back and forth, all of that. So anyway, but the truth is, Singapore, richer than Great Britain today. And then Hong Kong happened. And then because Hong Kong happened, China even today happened. Because China's like, wait a minute, what went on over there? And then China went on to do the exact same thing with its SEZs, the special economic zones, some of the most free market zones in the world. And then look at it happen in communist China, who, when it comes to economics, decided that we're going to do the free market, we're going to be capitalist, because that's the only way. We tried everything else. We killed hundreds of millions of people, and we have nothing to show for it. But now that we're tired of being disrespected members of society, because guess what? That's the other thing too. You want to be respected in this world? You're going to have to be among the prosperous ones for other reasons. Would it be nice, G, that we respect people just because? Absolutely. But that's really not the world we live in. So when China got tired of being disrespected, they're like, maybe we got to build also some prosperity here, because then they're going to hear us. And today, China, being one of the, being where it is at, even Hollywood, who tries to tell the world how to think, is being told by China what movies to make and how to tweak stories and history in order to be palatable for them. You see the power that comes with being prosperous.
Yeah, this is facts. I do agree with her. Like, when I look at Africa, some of the challenges that we've had, colonization is a big problem with that. Because for us, it's not necessarily that, oh, you were colonized. It's what happens post-colonization, how a lot of these superpowers kept their foot on our necks. So, like, for example, when you look at a country like Zimbabwe, essentially right now, the country has been on sanctions since 2000. So if you're on sanctions, you can't really trade with anybody. It's difficult to create businesses. A lot of people have to move out, and then we suffer a lot of brain drain. That's just part of the problem. We also have internal problems with things such as corruption. We have things such as the systems that are not designed necessarily to prosper these countries, because what colonization was and how it was set up in a way that resources would have been moved. So like, for example, Zimbabwe was colonized by Britain, so a lot of our resources had to move to Britain. So those are the systems that are in place. So a lot of things that your transactions were only in place to transact with the British. So when the British put sanctions on you, that means your economy doesn't have funding. And then also the entire system was designed not necessarily to benefit the country. So then when you have leadership in place using the same system, they then start taking those resources and taking them for them. So you find that the systems that we have in place were never really designed for the continent to prosper. They were only designed for the colonizers to prosper. However, also, you have to also take account that countries like America are 200 years old, or I don't know, 400. I don't know how old America is. And some countries in Africa, for example, South Africa was born in 96. So South Africa will be like 28 right now. I think so, 26. So they're still young and still learning.
What would you recommend concretely to countries like Senegal to get the hell out of the way, let's say, of the people who would, like you, would do everything they could to try to make it better? I mean, one of the things that happened with India is India established the Indian Institute of Technology, which is a deadly engineering school, and a huge number of its graduates went to Silicon Valley, as you well know. And many of the successful Indian graduates of IIT started to dump money back into India and build a capitalist infrastructure there, or help build a capitalist infrastructure there. So this sort of thing can really take hold. If you were making recommendations to governments who wanted to get on board and stop being like Chad, Haiti, Central African Republic, Congo, South Sudan, Libya, Yemen, and Venezuela, etc., what concrete steps should they take from the bottom up to get the hell out of the way?
Exactly. So two things we've been doing, because I'm a practitioner, as that's my entrepreneurial journey. I'm an entrepreneur, so I practice what I preach. But I also preach. I preach for free markets. And so when it comes to that, I'm one of the hats that I wear is as the director for the African Center for Prosperity of the Atlas Network, the largest organization in the world of free market think tanks around the world. And so what we do there is we work on reforms around the world to take down barriers of entry for local entrepreneurs. So that's one thing. But as we all know, that's a great initiative to take, and we've been making some really good advances in many countries, especially in Ghana. We've been making a lot of progress with our partners there, Imani. But that is piecemeal legislation. It takes forever. It is hard as heck. And by the time you made a gain here, you made 20 losses over there, and it's a continuous problem. But until we get better, we got to continue at it. So that's one thing we've been doing. And so that's a hat I wear, working with free market think tanks to try to make it easier for local entrepreneurs to join in the party. Additionally, I'm going bold. I'm going radical. For the past few years, we've been advocating an idea for Africa that found some of its roots in Latin America. And again, I'm related to the people who are involved in this. My husband being one of the key figures in this movement, a movement called the Charter Cities. Paul Romer calls it like that. He's a Nobel laureate in economics. Others call it the Free Cities. I like to call it the Startup Cities. So the best way to think about it, Jordan, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier when you use the word operating software. Most of the most of the low-income nations, so meaning back in the days, the way we used to call it is poor nations, they have regulations for poverty. They're basically regulated for poverty, meaning the laws, the set of law, poverty. It only calls poverty. Yeah. And so what some of these folks have thought about, looking at the Dubai example, Dubai just recently entered the top 10 of international financial centers of the world. And what Dubai did at some point is think about it and be like, on this bare, plot of sand that's technically worth nothing right now as is, this 110 acres of land sand everywhere. They're like, well, maybe Sharia law is not the best for business. We got to think about better set of laws for business. We're talking about only about business, not family law, not anything else, but business. And they decided there's got to be something better.
Business.
And so they looked around, and that's actually when, to take one of the terms you used earlier, they're starting to realize, common law is actually a better way for business, specifically British common law. So at that point, and I'm oversimplifying here because otherwise we can totally geek out on it. Remember, this is like one of my latest things that I've been involved in, but latest, it's been the past 10 years, and I'm going to share with you a win. So Dubai is like, we have to adopt British, common law, primarily British common law. We're going to hire retired British common law judges to come and educate the law here, train our own people. And that, along with many other reforms, to also become a top center when it comes to the, and in the free market when it comes to the finances. Dubai...
that British common law system, so it's very, very interesting theologically and metaphysically. So it's predicated on the idea that every individual has all the rights that there are, except for those that are specifically regulated and limited by legal necessity. And then generally that realm of necessity has emerged only as a consequence of disputes between people. So you're free to do whatever you want unless you have a dispute with someone else. Then the dispute is adjudicated according essentially to constitutional and theological principles, and then a precedent is established. And then the whole body of law built up that body of precedents.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's bottom up, not top down.
It's totally
and
that.
English common law is a gift from God, man.
No,
it's something else.
Absolutely. And
and that's fascinating. Like, coming from a former British colony, we have the same laws, but somehow we've messed it up. Because, like she said, a lot of these poor countries are legislated for poverty. And it's sad. It's sad. For me, the sad part, I think, and what I think is the solution to African problems is essentially the governments. They have to change. There's a need of a paradigm shift within their mindsets. Because it's like, listen, if you gave me $45 billion in the country, I'll do something with it. Like, I'll improve that country because I understand the fundamentals of economics and how these things work and how you have to position yourself in the global sphere. Like, right now we live in a global village, right? So that just means like we have the resources, we have everything we need. What we essentially need is capital to be able to build up infrastructure that generates revenue, that then enables us to pay back whatever capital from wherever we got it from. But then whenever we finish paying that person off, we have the capability to keep on generating those revenues because we've established ourselves as a player. And that's where the law comes in. So when you're looking at Dubai, the example that she gives, what they were able to do in establishing these laws is to move away from an archaic type of thought process and to be able
that's
to
the key word there when you said bottom up. So common law is so much better for bottom up approaches. And we all know that markets work better in a bottom up approach. And also when they have to educate the law and resolve a dispute, they're going to be much more respectful to the contract that was passed between the two parties than, say, civil law would be. Right? And so anyway, so from this standpoint here, you have Dubai who is now trying to put all of this together, and eventually they put a set of laws together that would now be conducive to being a top international financial center in the world. And voila, in less than a generation, in less than 25 years, Dubai completely unrecognizable.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing, man. Like, when I look at Africa, like, I'm very disappointed because the opportunities are massive. And by Africa, it's a big continent. We have over 56 countries, each with its own weird things going on at a time. But the main thing is, from an economic fundamentals, is like, it's all about supply and demand. What can we supply and what do we demand? What do we need? At this point in time, I can tell you about a country that I grew up in, Zimbabwe. What we need essentially is we've needed a lot of capital in order to fix up our infrastructure to be able to create opportunities and jobs for our people, right? If you take that, you look at the resources that we have, I think we're like number 4 or something in production of things like lithium. If you're able to create lithium and then have refineries that are able to refine that lithium into a usable resource that the world needs, and you're able to export it, bypassing certain places such as China, straight to the US, straight to other different parts of the world, But in order to be able to build refineries and things like that, you need the capital. That's the capital that you need, right? Once you take that money and you have the policies in place to be able to do it. The challenges that we have at present day moment is we have a lot of fundamental problems. So like a refinery is not necessarily our biggest need. What we need right now is infrastructure such as hospitals, fixing our roads, fixing things like that. So the problems that you have is if you do get 10 billion to build a refinery, you have these other problems that need solving. And you need someone who has the resolve to say, I'm not solving these problems. I'm building the refinery. Because once I have the refinery, I can pay back my loan, but also I can build the streets. However, if you don't fix the roads, it's like, how are you going to move those resources that you have? And that's just on policy. And then in terms of laws, the hard part is a lot of people do come up with business. A lot of people do have these ambitions, and a lot of people do try to do this. But because the governments, they don't really think long term. A lot of these people who come into power, they have a short term mindset whereby they're only willing to come into power and take those resources for themselves and not use them. And then for me, it's so sad. It's like, yo, how much money do you need until you're satisfied? How much money can you be corrupt for until you're satisfied? Like, listen, if you've been in power for 10 years and you're still taking money from, it's like, come on, man. Like, you're holding us back. Just take as much as you need and step aside and let the people move on. Because it's sad how Africa has been in the same position for my lifetime. Like, I'm 29 years old. So that means for the past 29 years, nothing has progressed. Things have only gone the other side. And it's disappointing because we know the solutions. But it's like for 29 years that I've been on this planet, nobody has been like, hey, let's do different. Yo, shout out to Rwanda. Rwanda has switched in my lifetime. Like, that's amazing. But for us to have 5 cases out of 56, it's like there's a big problem there. And there's need to take accountability and responsibility to be like, hey, we want to develop our nations and we want to do better. How can we do that? Free markets, whatever needs to happen, let's do it. Because at a certain point, something has to change. Something has to give. Life cannot keep getting worse and worse for people. And we cannot keep on relying on, I don't even know what we rely on, because right now it's just sad. It's sad the state that we find ourselves in and how much we have to go and try and have our people leave our own countries to go to different countries and become the labor. Like, I walk into supermarkets, I walk into places and you see a lot of immigrants. I'm like, yo, you have a PhD and you're driving a taxi. Like, what's going on? And this is because there's a certain group of people who just refuse to make the right decisions for the best of their people. I don't get it, man. I don't get it. But definitely, we're not poor because we're colonized. We're just poor because at a certain point, the mindset, there's just need of a huge paradigm shift in order for us to progress and do what we need to do. With that said, hope you guys enjoyed this reaction. I'll definitely be seeing you in the next one.